Hello and welcome to The Green Room. If you are new to this podcast, this is our opportunity to dig deeper on the sermon that Pastor Brian just wrapped up. This sermon was, let's take a look, this was the last in the series of the Games of Life.
Yeah.
And this service in particular, I love the title of this one. You have to get a clue to give a clue. And I
dun.
I'm going to start right out. Let me grab my phone here because I had an awesome question from somebody who's in the audience this morning.
Okay.
And it has to do with your receptivity scale, your $4 word that you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
Their question is, are you guys ready? How do you reach a family member who is probably a -2, but who has a spouse that is a -6, and not cause the -2 and the spouse -6 to fight
Wow.
or resist?
Wow.
Wow, that's a good question.
That's a great
Man.
one. Jumping right in.
Well, algebraically, two minuses is a positive, so you're on the positive side. I think. So looking at the scale, so one of the spouses is they're very, very close. It sounds like they're in an understanding station, and the other one's -6. Is that what they
Correct.
said?
Yeah.
So they're extremely hardened. So not uncommon, by the way. Not uncommon for a lot of folks that we reach at Oak Ridge. I would say that it's very common for us at Oak Ridge to be reaching folks we call spiritual mismatch, meaning one of the spouses will come first and typically bringing the children, and the other one is like, whatever. And so that's very common. So I would say you're not alone. That's a normal thing. But if you're working with the couple and you're trying to work with them, I would say continue to work with the person that's like at a -2 and continue to move towards that stage individually, because here's what Paul says. He says that one person in a household's faith has an impact on their spouse. So Peter says that also in 1 Peter, but Paul says it also in 1 Corinthians 7, that focus on the person who is receptive, and don't try to be covert, don't try to be, underground kind of Christian, but genuinely continue to pray and try to lead that person to Christ. And don't be surprised if by that conversion, that person has an impact on their spouse over time. May not be overnight.
Right.
Think of the story of Lee Strobel, I think it was last year, that movie came out on The Case for Christ and his journey. Well, his wife actually became a Christian first, Leslie, and her faith took off. And it irritated him. So I think he moved from like a -3 to a -12 because of Leslie's, faith. But what it did is that over time, he was able to begin to, God did the thing that God does best. He began to create circumstances in the husband's life that humbled him and broke down. And so we mentioned that. How do you move people in the scale? It's pain, problem, pressure, and change. Those are the things that move people. And so that's what you do. I would continue to work with the person that's open, and then pray for the person that's not. Anybody have any other on that? Any other ideas or thoughts? That's what I would do.
Sure. So my question was for those people in your lives that were once Christians and now they kind of stepped away from the faith, and it doesn't really make any sense. And you're kind of like, wow, why did this person stay in and the other person didn't stay in, whether it's family or friends or what have you. My question was, what are some practical tips that you can do besides meeting, felt needs and not faith needs and all that good stuff, but like sharing the message and sharing the gospel and just being there for them in a Christian way, for those that know everything that they need to know, but they don't have that faith.
Yeah. I would say that's an awful lot of people, sadly.
Yeah.
And I think that every family has some of those folks. I know, I've seen that over the years. Hundreds of people who seemed as though that they, made a decision and they seemed like things were going well. And so here's the first thing I would say to us is that I'm not the judge. So I would say to us, the first thing is, don't make an assumption. The second thing I would say is that there's no timer for backsliding, and that's the difficult thing. The scripture doesn't say, well, they probably weren't really a Christian if it's 5 years or more. I mean, there's just no scripture like that. So what I do is I try to take a person at their word. So for example, if they act like they're not a Christian, I treat them like they're not. If the person says they are and is adamant about it, then I hold them to the expectations that the Bible does. if you're a Christian, then these are the things that you should do. So the Bible gives us, admonitions of how you treat someone who's fallen away. And the things that you do is that you exhort them and you begin to, speak into their life. You try to correct them. You try to love them and you try to move them back towards. Paul said one of the greatest activities is to restore and reconcile a fallen brother. But it's hard work. So I would say first check yourself. Just kind of don't do a judgment factor. That, well, maybe they weren't really a Christian. I think we like to feel better about that because it makes me feel better. It's like, well, maybe they really weren't. It was all a childish decision, and so, I'm just not even going to believe that because they seem so far from God. But I'm just telling you, I've been far from God. And I remember when I was about 18 years old, I was in tech school, and I was living as though I were not a Christian. And I remember I was very far from God, and I was living like I was not a Christian. And I remember this guy, one day I was a faculty assistant, so I was in the room where the faculty assistants were. And he came up to me, and I was at a desk, and he kneeled down in front of the desk, and he started talking to me. And after about 5 minutes, all of a sudden I realized, this dude's witnessing to me. And I'm just telling you, it tore me up. Cut me to the core, because I realized if this guy is witnessing to me, then my life is telling him that I'm not a Christian. And it messed me up. Now, I'd like to say that day I got everything right. I didn't. But it started a process that took about 2 more years before I got my life completely turned around. So I would say it's a tough deal. It's
That
art,
actually
not science.
goes directly into my question. It really stuck to me when you said, get in the game if you want to be used by God, and He's going to directly place you where He wants you. Well, I work in an environment where there's a lot of kidding and cutting up, and I work with a lot of non-believers. And so it's very easy for me to backslide and start becoming the way of the world. And when someone says to you, wow, I thought you were the Christian of the group, it hurt me so bad. And so what advice do you have to someone to get in the game and to talk to those people when they already have an expectation that you might be fake, or that you might be only saying this because you're trying to turn on your church, your preacher part of you. So that was like, I had that yesterday. They're like, oh, you're the the Christian girl. And I was like, oh, crap. What did I say today that is going to turn them away or make me feel fake? And they're like, go to your little church so you can put on your little preacher act. And I was like, oh my gosh, now what do I do? I wanted to cry in that moment. And I was like, I prayed. I was like, Lord, I really let you down. Like, what did I, but I don't even know what I did to let him down. So what advice do you have to those who are new believers that are now trying to seek opportunities in a workplace where they were not a Christian before, but they are now, and for those who may have backslid and said the wrong thing, and they have people who are now on watch of your actions?
So the very first thought that popped in my head was actually when I did recommit my life to Christ, because I said it was about a 2-year journey, and that took me back to finally recommit. But before that, I started in my career. And in my career journey, I made a friend, and one of the guys that I was hanging out with, we would go out drinking. And I remember when I recommitted my life to Christ and God convicted me that that's just completely wrong, I was like, oh no, what do I say to Bill? And so I just prayed about it. And one day I went to Bill and I said, I just need to share with you something that's happened in my life. I talked to him about that I recommitted my life to Christ, and I said, I just want to apologize to you. He said, why? I said, I want to apologize to you because I feel like I was living a life that was fake. I'm not that person, and that's not fair to you. And I really still want to be your friend, but I just need you to know that I need to now live who I was called to be. And it messed him up for a while, and I think he put a distance for a little while.
Yeah.
But it helped me to be honest about the fact that I haven't been living the way I've been called to live. But then over time, that softened, and he began to see that my life was the real deal. And the second thing I would say is to be authentic and transparent. I think one of the worst things Christians do in the workforce is they try to pretend to be too Christian-y. No one can relate to that.
It's a very fine line to like not be rude to them when they do speak of things that are not exactly Christian-y, but then to also like not be too prude and not be too Christian-y, you know, and not be too slang. It's very a fine line.
Yeah, it's extremely difficult.
Yeah, I'm finding that.
Very difficult. The guys that I
And
ran
humbling.
around with, you know, they like to, see, I worked in a tower that was in Tulsa, it's downtown Tulsa, and at the bottom of the tower were all the restaurants, and it was a skating rink. And so I was on the 14th floor, Bank of Oklahoma. And so we'd go down every day to eat, and the guys that I worked with, about 4 of them, and every single day their goal was to eat and watch women, and then make comments throughout our entire lunch that were unbelievably vulgar. Every one of them married with children.
Oh, no.
And unbelievably vulgar. So this was day in and day out. It was extremely difficult to live in that environment and just to continue to try to not be a jerk, try not to be, you know, like, oh, I'm so much better, and try to be authentic, be who you are. I did pray, you know, each day at my meal, and I was like, dear God, please let them not be so vulgar. At least for 5 seconds they shut up, and that was about it. And after that, they just carried on. But I just tried to be authentic more than anything else, be who I really am. And they would try to goad me, you know, and, you know, oh, I know you're that way too, blah, blah. And so you just have to continue to be salt and light. A cool testimony is that I recently, the guy that trained me, about a year or two ago, we were in Oklahoma. I can't remember. It wasn't that long ago. We were in Oklahoma, and I thought, I'm going to go and visit him. So this is one of the guys that I hung out with that did. And I went to his house, and I said, I just want to thank you for mentoring me when I was starting out as an engineer. And I want to tell you what an impact you had on my life. I mean, that dude teared up.
Aww.
And we reconnected relationally. Well, I've been watching his Facebook. We connected on Facebook. And man, that dude, God has changed his life, because he's like posting all kinds of stuff about God and Jesus. And I'm just like, wow. So
really
I don't
cool.
know his whole journey. I really don't. But I know that we just live authentically, be salt and light the best you can. Don't join into the garbage, you know.
It's hard.
Don't be someone you're not, and leave the results in the hands of God. And sometimes, I remember another guy, years later, one of the guys that was messing with me and making jokes and that kind of thing. Years later, he pulled me aside. We were in the office alone, and he said, hey, I want to ask you a favor. And I said, what's that? And he said, would you pray for my son? And I'm like, of course I would. And his son had gotten on drugs, and it was just destroying their lives. And I prayed, you know, for his son, and I prayed with him right there. Well, probably about 10 years later, we went back and we went to church, attended a church, and you can't make this up. The guy's name was Woodrow Wilson Warren, WWW. So you can't make that kind of stuff up. We went to church at First Baptist Broken Arrow, and we were visiting friends, and I'm walking down the hall, and they had a big Sunday school program. And they had Sunday school names on the door and the teacher's name. I'm walking down the hall, and it said Woodrow Warren. Now, how many Woodrow Warrens can there possibly be? I'm like, what? So I had to hang around just for grins and giggles. It was him. He had committed his life to Christ. I was like, what in the world? So how cool is that?
Yeah.
So, you know, you just don't know the seeds that you're planting and how your life is making an impact if you're real, if you'll be real.
Yeah.
And I would also say, too, take heart, because that happens to all of us. I work at a church, and I'm still like, ooh, should I have said that? Like,
Yeah, it's really difficult.
And that's just staff meeting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right, that's just on Mondays, okay? Thursday, I'm done.
Yeah, Thursday. He's
My
like,
office door is closed.
You need to listen.
I cannot do anything wrong if nobody comes in.
I was going to add to that too, that I've had one of those situations too, where I said something and somebody goes, "Oh, that's the missionary saying that," chiming in with the jokes, and it cut me. But the cool thing is, one of those guys saw that it bothered me quite a bit, and we had a pretty good relationship. But he started asking me questions because he noticed that I was different and that I didn't act like the other guys all the time. But I was real with him and let him know, we mess up, man. Christians aren't perfect. We don't act like we're holier than everybody. And I like something you said in the sermon that I was going to incorporate in that story was you said, kick the tires on Jesus. Yeah. And that's kind of what I've seen happen is he'll kind of ask me questions and stuff like that. He's kind of kicking the tires like, let's see what this Jesus guy is all about, So it can, although cut you at the time, it may move into something that could be positive in the end.
Yeah, when there's a bunch of them together, it's pack mentality.
True.
And so you just don't respond
You're
in
such
those
bullies.
scenarios. But you don't know what's going on individually. And if you keep if you don't blow the bridge, if you keep the bridge open relationally, you just never know when that person is going to have a pain, a problem, a pressure, or a change, where they come to you and say, I don't know much about this God thing, but I'm just going to ask you to pray or something. And you just don't know.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
The whole question thing is one that really caught me today. I posted an Instagram and a Facebook post on something that you said, which was some people ask questions to distract you. Yeah. Because they just want to argue. And a long time ago, I was a high school history teacher, and the history department in the secondary level can be very interesting. Well, and myself, I also, because historically you want to, you're going to just fight it, right? And really, when you think about it, there's just as much biblical combat history that's going to promote it. But if you don't know it at the time, and of course I was a younger Christian and I was really starting to come into my own, and I had this one guy who would literally attack me every day. Every day he'd start hitting me with those questions, right? And I would get so frustrated, and I would go back and I'd say, okay, and I would research all night long, and I would try to go into my Bible and find out where I could get I would ask my pastor, what can I do? What can I do? And it was the best advice ever. It was, don't do anything. They don't want to hear it. They want to fight with you. They want the argument. Walk away. Well, anybody who knows me knows that was really hard. And so here's what I'm saying to you. Here I am, and this is probably 15 years later, and I still have a hard time when somebody wants to argue the Bible or argue about God or argue any of that. And and so I guess I was coming back to you too about saying, what kind of tips do you have? How do you just walk away with that and not dishonor God? How do you do that?
I quoted this verse, and I wanted to check myself. 2 Timothy 2:23. He says, again I say, don't get involved in foolish, ignorant arguments that only start fights. Verse 24, a servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but be kind to everyone, be able to teach, that's knowing your Bible, and be patient with difficult people. Pretty good stuff on that one. So I had to learn that the hard way. And I think that every Christian goes through that phase where you do get a little Bible under your belt and you're like, I can answer that. Pow, 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 pow. Right. But what you learn over time is that I didn't do anything. All I did was just debate and fight. And there's some people, that's just what they want to do.
Right.
They just want to push your buttons. They don't really want to know more about the gospel. And so it's just a waste of energy and time.
Even more so in the digital age now, because I feel like sometimes I'll be scrolling on Facebook, like, you want me to comment right now. Like, you want me to tell you this is complete, crap, but
That's
I don't.
True. People are baiting you.
Yeah.
And social media is the dumbest, but please tell me. We're learning. Do not fight on social media. If you feel any emotion in you when you strike the keyboard, stop. Stop the madness. Don't do that. We need to get back to the relational one-on-one. If you need to talk to someone, talk to them face to face. If you don't know them, then shut up. Okay, you don't do that. That's insanity. So yeah, it's the wrong place. It's the wrong environment. So definitely don't do that.
I can't imagine anybody saying, "Oh, I saw this Facebook post and I saw these people arguing and then I got saved." It was amazing. That's never happened. There's no way.
Good point. That's a great point.
What about for somebody like me who has the heart to share with other people, but I'm a little more reserved and awkward and shy? Like, how do I approach somebody? I mean, is it just going with the faith that when I open my mouth, the Holy Spirit will give me the things to say, or what? I mean, what's the best approach in that?
Well, I think, first of all, I would say that most people fit your category. Would you agree? Most Christians kind of fit that category.
I know, I'm awkward.
It's a little bit, it's hard for me. I'm not as, outwardly extrovert and that kind of thing. But the good news is, because most people are that way, you're best fit to have those conversations with those folks. And so some of it is just praying for
So
the
maybe
right.
I can reach people that are kind of like that themselves.
Yes,
And they'll say, hey, I
absolutely.
can see that in you, so I can relate and
Yeah.
take it from there.
You could even pray for confidence. You know, like, Lord, I know that there's someone that you want me to talk to today, and it might be stretching me.
Yeah,
And
like I want to be sensitive to the Spirit's promptings,
Yeah.
but I also need that confidence.
Yeah.
Maybe like you're saying, pray
give me the
about,
confidence to
and
speak
the
to the
boldness.
person you want me to.
One of the greatest confidence boosters of all is getting really good at knowing how to share the gospel. Understanding the 4 basic elements. And I know I'm doing a shameless plug again, but you need to go to Share Class
Yep.
and learn GOGO, if nothing else. In your head, you know where to go. And in your head, you know, oh, okay, the 4 points of the gospel are, and I'm not going to tell you because you got to go to Share Class. And so getting confident in that will actually help you. And then, especially for you, kind of what we said today and with Philip, is that we have to learn the art of letting them lead and recognizing that there are openings and use those openings, but don't take control of the conversation. And that's
It's one of the things you said about that too is that really meant a lot to me was the care about the person, because that's so big. And I think even if I don't have the right words, if I show that I genuinely care about somebody, they're more apt to listen to what I have to say because they know it's coming from a real place in my heart and not just something I'm saying to smooth things over or to sound good. You know,
yeah, and that means
genuine.
the world. That means the world. Any other questions or anything there?
No, you answered mine.
So we're at about 20 minutes, and I think it's a good cutoff point. But I just want to encourage you to clue some folks in as you go through your life. Pray about the people around you. Create a prayer list, and I also want to give you a sneak peek because in 2020, next year, the lead up to Easter, we're going to do a series called "Pay It Forward," FOUR. And what we're going to do is we're going to challenge you to name 4 people that you're going to create a relationship of the gospel with. And then you're going to begin praying for them daily, and you're going to invite them, and you're going to work and see what God does. Because I think God's going to save some folks. I think we're going to see a huge influx of people giving their life to Christ. So be praying about that and thinking about that. So I've given you how many months to think about that? You can come up with 4 names in that many months. All right, guys, we'll see you next time on the Green Room. God bless. Have a great discussion in your small group. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.